My name is Moira Fradinger, and I teach in the Comparative Literature department at Yale. Mostly Latin American culture, film, and political intellectual history, and some European culture too. And I also teach theoretical courses that concern psychoanalysis and gender studies. Right now I have just finished a massive project about the transformation of the figure of Antígona, the Greek tragedy, in the continent, in Latin America. And I'm about to send 7 translations from Spanish, Haitian Creole, and Portuguese into English of 7 plays to the same publisher, Oxford. I'm visiting the University of Oregon actually for the first time, and I was very kindly invited by Professor Cecilia Enjuto Rangel and Pedro Caro and Sangeeta Gopal. The subject of my talk is to explain how to view the metamorphosis of a very millenarian mythical character whose name is Antigone, comes from ancient Greece, who actually has a much longer history behind her than just the version that Sophocles did very famously in 5th century Athens, and how this character has been metamorphosed, cannibalized, rethought, rewritten, and written again throughout Latin America since the formation of the new republics after the Spanish Empire fell apart and the Spanish were actually kicked out of the continent. So we have in Latin America, I would say 200 years of thinking about this character, and my take on this is to see Antígona as a critical figure to undertake a very incisive resistance and critique of the neo-colonial order that establishes after independence. So after independence, instead of getting rid of the colony, what happens according to the figure of Antigone, according to the people who have imagined Antigone again, and according to my reading of Antigone, what has happened is she has been needed in order to criticize the reinstantiation of the colonial regime. Antigone is an ancient mythical character that was appropriated by Sophocles for the festival of Dionysus in the 5th century Athens. And what Sophocles does with the character is he has her rebel against the prohibition to bury her brother, and she is caught by the sovereign who is in place, Creon, and Creon decides that the punishment will be death. So she risks death in order to fulfill the task that she considers the legal or the ethical way to treat corpse. So this was not the case in the mythical versions that we have of her. In many versions, she survives. She performs the task of burial, but she survives. When it comes to the 5th century Athens festival of theater, Sophocles has her killed. She has become a very important figure of resistance in many versions of what this resistance is doing. One of the versions of this resistance is resistance to a male law, because she does say to the Creon, to the sovereign in question, that this is man's law. This is not divine law. She's following divine law or unwritten law, which is to take care of the corpses that are dead, right? To have a proper funeral for everyone. So she has been considered a figure for rebellion in terms of fulfilling divine law, the right law, not man's law, which is contingent, and also fulfilling the role of the rebel against the decisions of a man that considers her just a woman who has no right to do what she believes should be done. You have to put this in the context of ancient Greece, where women were not citizens, and they could not be part of the assembly of free men, right? So the assembly, the democratic assembly in ancient Greece was an assembly socially determined, let's put it this way. Only men participated and only propertied men participated. So it's very important that she's a woman doing it, and she's cast as a woman doing this, performing this rebellion. I think Antigone has been reappropriated fully as a resistance figure, which is not the case if you read the classicist work on Antigone. Many people think that she was a conservative character. She was for the preservation of family bonds, etc., etc. But I think that there has been, right now I would say, probably 70 years, 7 decades of reappropriating the figure of Antigone to represent forms of resistance that concern the dismantlement of patriarchy, let's put it this way. And in the particular case of Latin America, this is incredibly obvious, and especially, I have done a periodization of the ways in which Antigone has been imagined throughout the 20th century, for instance, but especially when we get to the later part of the 20th century and the 21st century, Antigone transforms into a character that wants to live, that wants to stop what we call feminicide. In English, you call it femicide. Wants to stop gender violence. So the character becomes, in the 21st century, a staging of a protest, a revolt against gender violence and against the violence that was committed to the body of the ancient Antigone, right? Of which little is talked about.